There are well-documented major mistakes throughout history. We thought the world was flat, we used to think a mullet was a good haircut, and we've been terrified of consuming saturated fats and cholesterol for decades. But the other thing we know about history is that these major mistakes get corrected. So if you're still buying heart-healthy margarine spreads and vegetable oils, you are not going to want to miss this.
T.C. Hale is not a doctor and does not claim to be a doctor or licensed in any type of medical field. Don't be an idiot and use anything heard on the show as medical advice. This information should be used for educational purposes only, and you should contact your doctor for any medical advice. Now get off me.
Long ago, a bunch of scientists discovered a correlation between high levels of saturated fats, and it was a particular type of saturated fat called palmitic acid, and cardiovascular disease. They cut up in a bunch of guys and it was like, man, look at all this saturated fat. That's horrible. We got to take it off the shelves. Because they concluded that because so many heart attack victims had these high levels of saturated fats, that we should run in horror from saturated fats. Run! Run! We're running! Since eggs and red meat and butter have high levels of these saturated fats, we were told that we need to avoid these foods. And we're like, okay, well, what do we eat? And we're like, we have these vegetable oils. They're cheap and they don't have a lot of saturated fats. We'll eat those. All right, well, that's cool. Humans have never had significant amounts of these vegetable oils ever. And it's also the same oil that we use to fatten our cattle faster. Well, who cares? We're running. Come on, we're running. And we ran. Butter became more evil than that blonde guy from the Karate Kid, and we started eating this margarine spread that was like a molecule away from plastic. We avoided saturated fats at all costs, and we wore parachute pants. And that's pretty much how it went. But we know now that these high levels of saturated fat, palmitic acid, don't come from consuming saturated fats. Here's how it works. The body stores glucose from carbohydrates in the liver and muscle tissues in the form of glycogen. But your body can only store so much glycogen, and once those stores are full, many excess sugars get converted into palmitic acid and stored as saturated fat. This is the cause of elevated levels of saturated fats for most of these suffering from cardiovascular disease. It's excess carb and sugar consumption. Consuming saturated fats has little to do with this equation at all. The same misguided thinking that had us shy away from saturated fat also had us screaming bloody murder at cholesterol. Here's the truth that has been proven time and time again. Approximately 85% of our cholesterol stores are made by our liver. Only about 15% comes from our diet. Since cholesterol has so many important functions, when we decrease our dietary intake of cholesterol to lower our cholesterol numbers, our body's like, forget you, I'll just make more cholesterol to make up for this deficit. Cholesterol is used to repair damage done by high amounts of insulin in the bloodstream. So it would make sense that if insulin goes high, cholesterol would go high too, just to help correct that problem. To lower your cholesterol, lower your sugar and carbohydrate intake, or whatever else is causing too much free radical activity, not your cholesterol intake. Lowering cholesterol intake has no long-term effect on your cholesterol levels. Now, genetics can play a role in how the body is predisposed to operate, but we can normally control the outcome with nutrition and lifestyle changes. Usually a whole family will have high cholesterol because they all grew up eating in a similar fashion, not because it's in their genes. There's rarely a malfunction in the body that just makes one person make too much cholesterol for no reason. Your body is making a high amount of cholesterol to fix a problem. With so many people leaning so far towards insulin resistance, the problem most commonly is that insulin levels are too high, and your body makes more cholesterol to deal with the inflammation coming from this high insulin. Yes, as the body patches up more and more damage, the passage can get smaller and smaller and eventually clog with excess cholesterol. However, blaming the problem on the cholesterol would be like blaming firemen on fires. Hey, look at that. Every time there's a fire, we see all these guys in yellow jackets and red trucks all over the place. If we just get rid of them, there would be no more fires. Well, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, does it? Why not just lower your insulin levels so your body doesn't need to make as much cholesterol? For decades, the world told us that 220 was the optimal number for total cholesterol in the bloodstream. The medical world came out with new findings stating that our cholesterol truly should be below 200. Well, let's say that 35% of the population has a total cholesterol that falls between that 200 and 220, the range that we considered healthy for decades. What happens to that 35% of the population when medical authorities lower the suggested blood cholesterol range to below 200? That 35% all become prescription buying customers, that's what. Wouldn't that give the cholesterol medication manufacturers a 35% increase in sales overnight? Well, that's interesting. Look, good free-range eggs, including the yolk, and quality meat are excellent dietary choices. We don't need to be afraid of the saturated fats or the cholesterol. Now, we talked earlier about how these mistakes in history always get corrected, but we've been talking about this mistake in the natural health world for over a decade. It just seems to take 20 or 30 years for bad science to catch up to the mainstream. So if you found this information helpful, be sure to click on the like and subscribe button. That tells the algorithm to share this video with more people, and we can get this mistake fixed even faster than we got that mullet thing corrected.